Plenty of questions.
I'd probably ask them what kind of complications we're looking at in the future with the vaccine.
I'd probably want to ask them how effective they are.
Oh, when is this gonna end?
And we're hoping to give you the answers as City News and 660 News team up for a Facebook Live Q&A on the COVID-19 vaccines. Good evening. I'm Tara Overholt. Thanks so much for joining us live tonight on this digital stream where you get a chance to put your questions to the expert. If you have a question, it's really easy. Just type it in the comments on the City News Calgary, City News Edmonton, or 660 News Facebook pages, and we will do our best to answer them over the next half hour. And the person who will be doing their best to give you the answers is Dr. Cheri Nijssen-Jordan, co-lead of the AHS COVID-19 Vaccine Task Force. Good evening, Dr. Nijssen-Jordan. Thank you so much for being here. And before we get going, can you just give us a bit of your background and your involvement in the Vaccine Advisory Board in Alberta?
Thanks for inviting me, Tara. I'm a pediatric emergency physician. I work, used to work in the Children's Emergency Department here in Calgary, and went overseas to work with Doctors Without Borders, worked in a measles vaccination campaign, came home to COVID, and I've been working with the Emergency Operations Center with AHS on and off since that time, and they asked me to come on board in December to help out with the vaccine task force.
We've had a lot of questions roll in on all of our digital platforms, so let's get started. Our first question comes in from our 660 News Twitter page asking, can we, or even should we, choose which vaccine we get?
At this moment in time, I think the important thing is not which vaccine, but when can I get the vaccine? And we would certainly encourage you to get whatever vaccine you can get. There are very few contraindications or reasons to not get a particular type of vaccine. If you're allergic to some of the components of each vaccine, which are available on the website, then those ones would not be good for you. But in general, any of the vaccines are appropriate for any of the clients.
All right, well, this question comes from Kimberly Bennett from our City News Calgary Facebook page. Will the vaccine give lifetime immunity, or will people need to be revaccinated every year?
That's a question that I don't think the answer is ready yet. We're still in the midst of looking at research, and only time will tell that. We probably will know more about that in the next year or two after we've been able to measure the immunity in individuals and see how long it lasts, as well as the amount of immunity that remains after having the disease itself.
I guess you could say we're still learning a lot about this virus and the vaccines, aren't we?
That is very true. There's many different aspects about this virus and the vaccine and its effect on the virus that we are looking at every day. And the interesting thing is that we know a lot more about this virus than we know about a lot of other viruses that have been around for a long time, just because there's been tremendous amount of interest, a lot of funding that's been given by governments, and the very rapid development of the vaccine that has enabled us to try and get a handle on the disease.
All right, let's get back to our questions. Carla Bilachuk on our City News Edmonton page asking, how does the government expect to give everyone who wants a vaccine one dose by the end of June if only 10,000 people are being vaccinated each day?
Well, Carla, that's a very good question. But the good thing is that as soon as we have more vaccine available, we will be able to vaccinate more than 10,000 people per day. We're certainly looking at the pharmacies being able to deliver about just under 200,000 doses per week. Alberta Health Services, we're hoping to be able to deliver about 140,000 doses per week. And the primary care physicians and other groups will be delivering in addition. So we hope that once we get enough vaccine that we could be delivering well over 350,000 doses per week.
Being part of this task force, just how difficult of a job is this to have the scope and the idea of getting, 4.5 million people vaccinated in Alberta?
That is a very big challenge, I can tell you that. It is interesting to, especially if you don't have enough vaccine, you have to try and portion it out as quickly and as fairly as you possibly can to try and get the really high risk groups. And we were certainly focusing on the seniors who are having most of the problems with the disease as well as the mortality. So that was our first focus, is trying to get the vaccine out to those individuals who would benefit most, and we would prevent some of these bad outcomes from happening.
All right, this one is sent into 660 News Twitter account. So if people get the AstraZeneca vaccine, can they get a Moderna or a Pfizer vaccine later? And will that get them better coverage? These are great questions.
Yeah, with the research that was done with AstraZeneca, it showed that it had really good effect on decreasing those serious outcomes. So they decreased the amount of hospitalization and mortality. So the effect from that perspective is very good. So I wouldn't worry too much about the coverage. I would get the vaccine for sure if it's available to you. The question of whether or not we're going to move from one vaccine on one dose to the other vaccine on the second dose. The research is just being done at the moment. We hope that there'll be some information that comes out of especially the UK, but there's probably some additional research being done in North America as well that will give us an idea whether or not that is okay or whether or not we don't get an effect. We just don't know yet at this moment in time.
Becky Gibbs sent us a question regarding the latest headlines on AstraZeneca and whether there's a risk of blood clots. Becky Gibb writes, why, when other countries refuse the AstraZeneca vaccine, why would we take it? I'm well aware it isn't the same batch number as the one that caused problems, but what exactly could have changed from one batch to another?
Again, this is an area that we first of all, there's a couple of things. One is that the blood clot idea, the cases that they saw there are very, very rare occurrences. So you don't tend to see them very often. And when they actually looked at a similar population, they found that the chances of that blood clot happening was the same in the population that didn't have the vaccine. So it was really kind of a controlled trial by having the vaccine and not having the vaccine, and there wasn't much difference. Pulmonary embolism or blood clots, those kind of things can happen in the general population at any given time, especially in the older population. So it's not unusual to see it. In terms of the batch number, certainly there is the type of vaccine that we received was made by a totally different company. It is the same recipe made by a different cook, and it comes out of the Serum Institute of India. So we are definitely not the same batch number. And we've been assured, and our experts and our scientific review committee have looked at this very carefully and have determined that there is no risk of concern at the moment, and that we should be moving forward with the vaccinations. The benefits from it far outweigh any of the problems that have been seen elsewhere.
And I think that's something that people can take away from it, that Health Canada and other officials are paying close attention to any kind of adverse effects that may happen, whether they are actually done with or caused by the vaccine or not. But they are really keeping a close eye on these things.
That's right. Both the national surveillance system as well as here in the province of Alberta, we have a very good surveillance system. So we are watching very carefully for any type of concern that might happen with the vaccine. We've not had any of that identified in the province or in the country.
Talking about AstraZeneca, government sources saying tonight that tomorrow the National Advisory Committee on Immunization is expected to change some recommendations regarding the use of the vaccine for those 65 and older. So why do we see changes to recommendations, whether it was the length between the Pfizer doses or now possibly that over 65 can use this? Why are we seeing changes throughout this vaccine delivery?
The main reason is that we see additional research coming out all the time. And with looking at that research as it comes into the scientific area, all of the different areas that are looking at vaccines are trying to find the best use for this vaccine as we possibly can. So they will review things on a very regular basis to make sure that we are maximizing its use.
And when it comes to that possible change that in Canada and here in Alberta that we might be giving possibly tomorrow this might be announced that it might be okay, the AstraZeneca vaccine for those over 65. Just last week, we opened it up to people 50 to 64. So is this going to change our vaccine rollout at all?
You know, it would be premature for me to comment on that. I've certainly not heard in any details on whether or not that is going to change in terms of the Alberta situation. I think we'll just have to stay tuned in that area.
Absolutely. All right, let's take another question from a viewer watching our live stream right now on the City News Edmonton Facebook page. Joshua Morales asks, can we get a different vaccine in between 2 doses of COVID vaccine, especially now that it's a 4-month interval?
So it's recommended that you don't get, if you've had another vaccine besides COVID, that you wait at least a couple of weeks before you get the first dose of the COVID. And then you need to wait at least 28 days after that dose before you get another dose. So that's why you can get a vaccine in between because of the interval, but please wait for that 28 days after the vaccine dose.
Is the risk depending on which other vaccines you might be receiving, or is it just too many vaccines at the same time?
Well, the issue becomes if you do have any sort of adverse reaction, or you just haven't had time to recover, then you certainly can, you mix the vaccines, you're just not sure about what the effects are from which vaccine you're taking. So it's best to kind of make sure that you're actually spreading them apart and have a chance to understand the effects of each vaccine as you get them.
That makes a lot of sense. A viewer on our City News Calgary page, Ryan McCarthy, asks, as a type 1 diabetic and 37 years old, when would I be able to book? Will there be any side effects a diabetic has to look out for?
Well, I think the second question is pretty easy. At this moment in time, we're finding that most of the side effects relate to fatigue and achiness, similar to what you'd see after a flu, mild flu, and especially with the first vaccine, they seem to be pretty mild. There's a few, you might get a little bit of a fever, but very minimal. It's just fatigue and tiredness. So those are the ones that we're seeing with all of the vaccines right now. And for an individual that has a chronic disease such as diabetes, Alberta Health has just placed on their website those lists of chronic diseases that individuals that have those conditions will be able to book in phase 2B. And hopefully that will be coming on after we've completed phase 2A, which we are currently in at the moment.
All right, and I think we have one more question here. I'm just going to pull it up. Why do we see changes to recommendations throughout the vaccine cycle? And will this change our planned rollout? You spoke a little bit about that, but maybe you can expand just why we see changes.
Well, there's a couple of reasons, and it depends on the type of change. So we are at the mercy of vaccine supply and its delivery. So many of the changes that have occurred have been based on manufacturing delays or delivery delays into the province. Once we've had the vaccine in the province, we've really worked very hard to get it distributed as quickly as we can to the appropriate groups that have been identified through the eligibility criteria. The other changes come as the rollouts occur, and the rollouts may be related to age, they may be related to specific groupings, and we may find, for example, with AstraZeneca, that it was not recommended at the time that it was introduced in Alberta for that group of 65 and over. So then we had to look and see what was the most appropriate group and how we might be able to get them into place. And again, it's all dependent on how much vaccine is available and whether pharmacies can dispense it, or whether or not there is opportunity to do it in other ways. So there are multiple factors that have been changing the vaccine program. That's one of the complexities of it, is that people tend to think it's really pretty easy to, just give the vaccine out, but there's many different factors that we have to take into account. We are trying to get them into the arms of Albertans as quickly as we possibly can.
All right, I think this is going to be our last question, and this is from our City News Calgary Facebook page. Diana Paquette asks, is the second shot still effective if we have to wait 4 months to get it?
So The evidence is suggesting that the immunity is lasting longer than what we had anticipated at the beginning. And that, again, is related to the research that is now coming out related to those places in the world that are giving a single dose of the vaccine. We are finding that it is still effective in that time frame. And as a result, the Alberta Health had decided that we would try and maximize the amount of supply we have, get the first dose into Albertans as quickly as we can, and then bring on the second dose to complete the vaccine course.
All right, those are all of our questions, but I just want to give you an opportunity. Is there anything that you want to add when it comes to getting these vaccines and to the public out there?
So a couple of things. One, I would say that people need to understand that we have lots of different ways to provide you opportunity to book in for your vaccine. We definitely encourage everyone to get a vaccine as soon as it's available for your age group and your condition. The methods that people can get the booking in is your pharmacies. There's a growing list of pharmacies throughout the province that will be offering vaccines to their clients, and you can book in directly through those pharmacy bookings. You can also go to our online booking tool, and the tool is, we've had a few glitches along the way, but we've learned from each of those glitches, and we're happy to have really good feedback and lots of information back from our clients. And we also have the ability to book through HealthLink, but we would strongly encourage you to go to the online booking or go to your pharmacies. That's really where the majority of people will have access. And the last point I would like to make is just please be patient and kind when you're dealing with the bookings. It is frustrating, I know, with all the, some of the confusion and not knowing whether or not you are eligible. Just check that Alberta Health website. That will help you. And just be patient when you're booking with any modality. It will get through. We will have enough vaccine coming forward for everybody in Alberta.
Great assuring words, and thank you so much for joining us tonight, Dr. Cheri Nijssen-Jordan. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to answer all of these really important questions. And for those out there, if you missed any part of this, it will be posted on our website and our Facebook pages. I'm Tara Overholt. Thank you so much for joining us for this COVID-19 vaccine Q&A. Stay safe and have a great night.